Welcome to Crosslight Healing Hope, where faith, miracles, and sacred mysteries converge. Today, we dive into a story so powerful, so extraordinary, it will make you question everything you thought you knew about the impossible. Imagine a man, a prophet, whose words could summon rain or drought, who could command fire from heaven, and even raise the dead. But what set him apart most was a power no other prophet possessed. He could run faster than a chariot, surpassing all human limits of strength. At the end of his life, this extraordinary man defied death, being carried up into the sky in a tornado, leaving us with a story unlike any other. Who was this man? A prophet, a vessel of God's power, a man whose legacy still resonates today. His name is Elijah, and his journey is nothing short of miraculous. Stay tuned, because this video contains some of the most amazing revelations you won't want to miss. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and stay with us until the end to gain a deeper understanding of Elijah's powerful legacy. Let's explore this mystery together, you won't want to miss a second. Now let's explore Elijah's miraculous journey, taking a deeper look at one of the most intense and defining moments in his life. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. They battle to the death. The image of Elijah facing 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel is not just any ordinary confrontation, it is a decisive battle between good and evil, between faith and idolatry, between belief in God and false gods. Elijah, alone, must fight against a large group of prophets, all serving Baal, the god worshipped and supported by Queen Jezebel. But what makes this confrontation so special is that there are no weapons, no soldiers, only a test, and all life and death depend on a miracle that only God can perform. For Elijah, this is not a battle of physical strength but a spiritual battle. On Mount Carmel, all present know that only a miracle can prove who the true God is. Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal, asking them to perform a single test. Each would prepare an offering, but no fire was allowed. Instead, they would pray to their God, and whoever could bring down fire from heaven to consume the offering would prove that their God was the true God. This test could not have been easier, but it was fraught with great danger. If the prophets of Baal could call down fire from heaven, they would prove that Baal was the only God, and all of Israel would have to return to worshipping Baal. If Elijah won, all of Israel would know that God was the true God. The prophets of Baal, outnumbered by many, were confident and prayed incessantly. They performed every ritual they knew, from shouting, to dancing, to cutting themselves with knives to shed blood, all to please Baal. But despite their best efforts, there was no sign that Baal had heard their prayers. Amidst the silence, Elijah could not sit still. He stood up and suddenly spoke up, mocking the prophets of Baal by asking, "Is Baal busy? Or is he on a trip?" Elijah not only challenged Baal, but also made a powerful statement about God's omnipotence. This confrontation, from words to actions, took place in an atmosphere of extreme tension, making it impossible for everyone present to not pay attention. The tension increased by the second, as the prophets of Baal could do nothing to call down fire from heaven. And then, it was Elijah's turn. He stepped forward and prepared his offering. Without haste or show, Elijah simply prayed humbly but with faith, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac and Israel, prove today that you are the God of Israel, and that I am your servant. Please answer me, so that the people may know that you are the true God." With just one short prayer, but full of power and faith, Elijah placed all his trust in God, believing that he would demonstrate his boundless power. That prayer was not just a call to faith, but a powerful declaration that only God could save and lead the people of Israel out of the darkness of idolatry. And as soon as Elijah prayed, miracles began to happen. A mighty wind and fire from heaven burst forth and consumed Elijah's offering, from the wood to the stones, even the water in the trench that Elijah had poured around the altar. The fire from heaven not only burned the offering, but also proved that God was the only God. In that moment, everyone witnessed an inexplicable miracle, a miracle that demonstrated God's boundless power. The entire Israelite people were terrified and immediately knelt down in worship. "The Lord is God, you alone are God." Nothing could compare to that moment on Mount Carmel. This was a great miracle, not only proving God's existence but also affirming his limitless power. And from that moment on, Elijah became not just a prophet, but a symbol of faith and the power of God. This battle was not just a religious confrontation, but a spiritual revolution, where the truth was revealed through a powerful and undeniable miracle. This confrontation was not just a battle of gods, but a battle of faith. When the miracle of fire from heaven occurred, it not only confirmed the power of God, but also changed the entire history of the people of Israel. This was the victory of true faith over idolatry, a powerful reminder that when we put our trust in God, nothing is impossible. This made everyone on Mount Carmel realize that God alone is the only God, and that no Baal or other god can compare to him. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that with faith and obedience, we can face any challenge and overcome the forces of darkness. The miracle of fire from heaven was not only an affirmation of God's power, but also a lesson in perseverance and absolute loyalty to faith. Those who witnessed this miracle would never forget that holy moment on Mount Carmel. And from then on, faith in God was strengthened and led the entire nation of Israel into a new era where idolatry had no place. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal not only demonstrated the greatness of God, but also proved that when we live with faith and obedience, God will always prevail over every challenge, and he will always protect us. But also proved that God is the only God. At this moment, everyone witnessed an inexplicable miracle, a miracle that demonstrated God's boundless power. The whole Israelite people were terrified and immediately knelt down in worship. The Lord is God, you alone are God. Nothing can compare to that moment on Mount Carmel. This was a great miracle, which not only proved God's existence but also affirmed his boundless power. And from this moment on, Elijah was not just a prophet, but a symbol of God's faith and power. This battle was not just a religious confrontation but also a spiritual revolution, where the truth was exposed through a powerful and undeniable miracle. This confrontation was not just a battle of gods, but a battle of faith. When the miracle of fire from heaven occurred, it not only confirmed God's power but also changed the entire history of the people of Israel. This was the triumph of true faith over idolatry, a powerful reminder that when we put our trust in God, nothing is impossible. This made everyone on Mount Carmel realize that God is the only God, and that no Baal or other god can compare to him. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that with faith and obedience, we can face any challenge and overcome the forces of darkness. The miracle of fire from heaven was not only an affirmation of God's power, but also a lesson in steadfastness and absolute loyalty to faith. Those who witnessed this miracle would never forget that holy moment on Mount Carmel. And from then on, faith in God was strengthened and led the entire nation of Israel into a new era where idolatry had no place. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal not only demonstrated God's greatness, but also demonstrated that when we live with faith and obedience, God will always overcome every challenge, and he will always protect us. But also proved that God is the only God. At this moment, everyone witnessed an inexplicable miracle, a miracle that demonstrated God's boundless power. The whole Israelite people were terrified and immediately knelt down in worship. The Lord is God, you alone are God. Nothing can compare to that moment on Mount Carmel. This was a great miracle, which not only proved God's existence but also affirmed his boundless power. And from this moment on, Elijah was not just a prophet, but a symbol of God's faith and power. This battle was not just a religious confrontation but also a spiritual revolution, where the truth was exposed through a powerful and undeniable miracle. This confrontation was not just a battle of gods, but a battle of faith. When the miracle of fire from heaven occurred, it not only confirmed God's power but also changed the entire history of the people of Israel. This was the triumph of true faith over idolatry, a powerful reminder that when we put our trust in God, nothing is impossible. This made everyone on Mount Carmel realize that God is the only God, and that no Baal or other god can compare to him. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that with faith and obedience, we can face any challenge and overcome the forces of darkness. The miracle of fire from heaven was not only an affirmation of God's power, but also a lesson in steadfastness and absolute loyalty to faith. Those who witnessed this miracle would never forget that holy moment on Mount Carmel. And from then on, faith in God was strengthened and led the entire nation of Israel into a new era where idolatry had no place. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal not only demonstrated God's greatness, but also demonstrated that when we live with faith and obedience, God will always overcome every challenge, and He will always protect us. It not only confirmed the power of God but also changed the entire history of the people of Israel. It was a victory of true faith over idolatry, a powerful reminder that when we put our trust in God, nothing is impossible. This made everyone on Mount Carmel realize that God is the only God, and that no Baal or other god can compare to Him. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that with faith and obedience, we can face any challenge and overcome the forces of darkness. The miracle of fire from heaven was not only an affirmation of God's power but also a lesson in steadfastness and absolute loyalty to the faith. Those who witnessed this miracle would never forget that holy moment on Mount Carmel. And from then on, faith in God was strengthened and led the people of Israel into a new era, where idolatry had no place. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal not only demonstrated God's greatness, but also demonstrated that when we live with faith and obedience, God will always overcome every challenge, and He will always protect us. It not only confirmed the power of God but also changed the entire history of the people of Israel. It was a victory of true faith over idolatry, a powerful reminder that when we put our trust in God, nothing is impossible. This made everyone on Mount Carmel realize that God is the only God, and that no Baal or other god can compare to Him. In that moment, Elijah demonstrated that with faith and obedience, we can face any challenge and overcome the forces of darkness. The miracle of fire from heaven was not only an affirmation of God's power but also a lesson in steadfastness and absolute loyalty to the faith. Those who witnessed this miracle would never forget that holy moment on Mount Carmel. And from then on, faith in God was strengthened and led the people of Israel into a new era, where idolatry had no place. The confrontation between Elijah and the prophets of Baal not only demonstrated God's greatness, but also demonstrated that when we live with faith and obedience, God will always overcome every challenge, and He will always protect us. With strong faith in God's power, Elijah continued his journey, bringing miracles to people in despair. When Elijah arrived in Zarephath, a poor widow had only enough flour and oil to prepare one last meal for herself and her son. She was overcome with grief and despair, as life seemed hopeless. Her story is a testament to the trials people face in their darkest moments. But it is in the most desperate moments that God's miracles can happen, and Elijah is the one who will bring that miracle to her. With absolute faith and trust in God's power, Elijah prayed and asked the widow to follow his instructions. "Make me a small loaf of bread from what you have, and bring it to me. Then you and your son will have enough food until the Lord sends rain," Elijah said. This simple yet powerful statement was a testament to obedience and faith in what God could do. When the widow obeyed and followed His instructions, God did not disappoint her, and from then on the flour and oil never ran out, even in the poorest of circumstances. But the story of Elijah and the widow did not end there. A more terrible ordeal came when the widow's son died. The death of the child was a great shock to her. A sense of loss filled her heart, as she saw no hope for the future. However, Elijah did not give up. He prayed and brought the child to God to ask for his life. And a miracle happened. The boy came back to life. The image of the boy opening his eyes, returning to life, is a touching and miraculous moment. It was a miracle that no one could explain, a clear sign of the limitless power that God gave Elijah. This story is not just about a miracle, but also about patience and absolute trust in God. When all hope seems lost, God can bring life from death. This is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, God can always change things and bring about miracles. Each miracle, from the feeding to the resurrection, is a clear demonstration of God's care and love for those who trust in Him. And it is in those quiet moments that we can perceive God's presence, as Elijah found Him in a gentle whisper. In the hustle and bustle of life, it's easy to think that God's presence can only be felt through big events. We picture God coming with thunderous force, amid dazzling miracles or overwhelming displays of power. But the story of Elijah teaches us a different perspective. God doesn't always announce Himself through big, loud displays. Instead, His presence can be found in the subtle, quiet moments of our lives, in what might seem like trivial or uneventful times. This truth was dramatically clarified for Elijah as he sought God's presence after a series of trials and tribulations that seemed to overwhelm him. Elijah, a prophet of great strength and courage, had just witnessed God's power in a dramatic contest on Mount Carmel. There, God answered Elijah's prayer by sending fire from heaven to consume an offering, proving that He alone is the true God. However, after that powerful moment, Elijah faced a difficult challenge: the wrath of Queen Jezebel, who sought to kill him in revenge for his defeat of the prophets of Baal. Frightened and exhausted, Elijah fled into the wilderness, questioning his purpose and feeling alone in his mission. In this moment of isolation and fear, God spoke to Elijah, not in the thunderous roar or fierce winds one might expect, but in the gentle whisper of a gentle breeze. This seemingly insignificant sound was the voice of God, and it carried a profound message. God did not appear in dramatic, earth-shaking events. Instead, He comes in a gentle whisper, reminding Elijah that His presence is often felt most deeply in the silence, in the quiet places where we are most open to hearing His voice. Elijah's encounter with God in this gentle sound speaks to a larger truth about how we recognize God in our lives. Often we get caught up in the chaos of life, the busy schedules, the noise of the world, the constant demands and pressures. In these moments, we can forget that God is with us, whispering in the silence, waiting for us to listen. This lesson teaches us that God's presence is not always found in the loud, attention-grabbing events of our lives, but in the quiet moments when we stop and open ourselves to His voice. Elijah's story encourages us to cultivate the ability to recognize God's presence in quiet moments. It's easy to get distracted by the noise and chaos of life, thinking that God is only present when something extraordinary happens, but if we pay attention and are patient, we will find that God is speaking to us in the silence, guiding us and comforting us in ways we may not always expect. This subtle, gentle presence is no less powerful than the grand signs we sometimes desire. In fact, it may be in these quiet moments that we experience God most deeply. In the midst of his despair, Elijah not only found comfort in God's quiet presence but also found a new purpose. After his encounter with the gentle whisper, God gave Elijah a new and clear mission, one that would mark a significant shift in the history of Israel. This new mission was not just for Elijah, it was part of God's larger plan for his people, ensuring that his work would continue long after Elijah had fulfilled his role. God instructed Elijah to anoint Hazael as king of Aram, Jehu as king of Israel, and Elisha as his successor as prophet. This command is significant for several reasons. First, it demonstrates that God's work is ongoing and that Elijah's role, while important, is not the end goal of God's plan for Israel. God is not finished with his people, and he is preparing new leaders to carry out his will. Through these anointings, God is preparing the stage for a future in which Israel will be led by leaders who will continue to do good and justice. The anointing of these new leaders marks a turning point for Israel. It is a symbolic and practical step toward renewal and hope. Israel, at this time, was a nation in turmoil, divided, rebellious, and often led by kings who did not honor God. By commissioning these new leaders, God is signaling that his plan for Israel is not yet complete. Even though Elijah feels alone and overwhelmed, even though he thinks he is the only one left who is still faithful to God, God is actually raising up others to continue his work. In a way, Elijah's new assignment reflects the continuity of God's work across generations. Just as God was faithful to Israel in the past, he is ensuring that his work will continue into the future. Elijah's role as anointer of these new leaders is not just about him, it is about securing Israel's future and ensuring that God's purposes will endure long after his time. This assignment is a reminder that no matter how much we feel the weight of the world on our shoulders, God's work is much bigger than any one person. It is a collective effort that spans generations, community, and nation. God's command to Elijah to appoint new leaders also carries a message of hope. It is a message that Israel will not be abandoned, that God's plans for his people are not hindered by the darkness of the present moment. Even when things seem bleak and hopeless, God is still at work, bringing about change, redemption, and renewal. Elijah's obedience to this new commission will play a vital role in bringing about much-needed change for Israel's future, and it is a sign that no matter how dire the situation may seem, God's power and purpose always prevail. This story serves as a powerful reminder that God's work is always moving forward, even when we cannot see it. We may face moments of doubt, despair, or loneliness, but just as Elijah's role was a continuation of God's larger mission, so too our lives are part of something much larger than ourselves. We may not always understand the full scope of God's plan, but as Elijah responded to God's call with obedience, his actions set the stage for a future of continued faith and leadership. This seamless transition paved the way for Elisha to step in and carry forward the mission with unwavering dedication. Elisha's legacy, a sign of continuity of faith. We often hear about someone inheriting a great legacy, but when it comes to spiritual leaders like Elisha, the act of succession takes on a much deeper meaning. This is especially true in the case of Elisha, Elijah's faithful disciple. Receiving the prophetic mantle from Elijah was not simply a symbolic act, but a continuation of a great mission, a connection between two generations, and a sign that the faith continues, constantly passing from one generation to the next. As Elijah prepared to leave, Elisha understood that the assignment he had received was not an easy one. This was not just a formality or a religious ritual. It was a heavy responsibility, carrying the prophetic mission that Elijah had carried out throughout his life. This mission was not simply a continuation of Elijah's work, but one that carried with it a strong belief in God's power and leadership. Elisha was not simply Elijah's replacement, he was a continuation and extension of God's work into a new era. When Elijah passed the prophetic mantle to Elisha, it was a powerful sign of continuity not only in work, but also in faith. This was a turning point not only for Elisha, but also for Israel, a nation in need of spiritual leadership to maintain and develop its relationship with God. Elisha did not simply receive a mantle, he took on the responsibility of restoring faith and proper worship in the nation of Israel. The prophetic mantle that Elijah gave to Elisha was not just a material item, but a symbol of the power and mission that God had entrusted to Elijah. In ancient culture, the passing of the prophetic mantle signified the transfer of power and responsibility. The cloak was a testimony that Elisha had been chosen to replace Elijah, to continue his work and bring renewal to the people of Israel. When Elisha accepted the cloak from Elijah, it was a very meaningful act. It was not only of physical value but also carried with it a profound spiritual power. Elisha was not only a successor, but also the inheritor of the mission that Elijah had undertaken. In that moment, Elisha understood clearly that this work was not easy, but if he continued to follow the path that Elijah had taken, he would have the guidance and protection of God. This cloak was a testimony that Elisha had inherited Elijah's mission, a mission that was not only to work for God but also to fight against the opposing forces, the difficulties and challenges that Elijah had faced throughout his life. Elisha not only received the prophetic mission but also the responsibility of spiritual leadership for the people of Israel. Elisha's journey was not only a continuation of Elijah's work, but also a challenging journey to restore faith in Israel. When Elijah passed on the prophetic mantle, he prepared Elisha not only to continue the work, but also to face a world filled with chaos and sin. Israel was going through a time of division and decline in faith. The kings of Israel had turned away from God, leading to invasions from other nations and a spiritual decline in the nation. Elisha, who took up the prophetic mantle, not only had to face sinful leaders but also had to fight to bring Israel back to the path of righteousness and true worship. It was in this situation that Elisha's obedience and faith in God were crucial to the continuation of Elijah's work. Elisha not only continued Elijah's work on a personal level, but he also had to maintain the faith of an entire nation. In taking on the prophetic mantle, Elisha also took on the responsibility of maintaining and spreading the faith of Israel. This continuity was not only work-related, but also spiritual, as Elisha understood that he was not only a leader, but also the custodian of the Israelites' relationship with God. Elisha's succession was not just a passing of the baton, but a continuation of the faith of those who had come before him. Elijah's faith had deeply influenced Elisha, and now Elisha was to continue to be an example to the people of Israel. Elisha's action in taking on the prophetic mantle not only demonstrated his obedience to God, but also serves as a reminder to us of the importance of passing on the faith from generation to generation. Elisha, the faithful disciple, understood the responsibility he bore. He was not only tasked with leading a community, but also with being a symbol of faithfulness to God. Every miracle Elisha performed, every decision he made during his tenure, was a testament to the continuity of faith, and a call for people to live according to God's will. The continuity of faith is not only to carry on the work of those who came before, but also to maintain and protect the sacred values we have received from those who came before. Elisha demonstrated that faith is a continuous flow, and that each person has an important role in maintaining and developing it. With the mantle of prophet, Elisha not only received power but also continued to carry out God's work. Elijah's mission was never over. It was Elisha's continuity of faith that was the key to Israel's return to the path of righteousness and worship of God. Elisha demonstrated that a person's mission is not only to carry on his own work, but to continue God's work, bringing hope and change to those around him. Thus, Elisha's act of accepting the prophetic mantle was not only a symbol of succession but also of the great continuity of God's work. It was a testament to the power of faith to change the fate of a nation and protect sacred values across generations. This seamless transition of power and responsibility highlights the importance of continuing the work and mission of those who came before us, just as Elisha did after receiving the prophetic mantle. The scene of Elijah being taken up into heaven by a tornado is one of the most powerful moments in the Bible. It was not just the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new divine journey. When Elijah was taken up into heaven, it may have seemed like an end to an era, but in reality it was a transfer of power and responsibility, marking a new beginning for those who would continue the work he had begun. The tornado was not just a natural event, but also a symbol of God's infinite power, a sign of the transfer of power from one generation to the next. Let's explore the significance of the tornado and this event from a theological perspective. God, in this moment, not only demonstrated his power through the storm, but through this event, he performed a significant act. He passed on the prophetic mandate to a new man, Elisha, who would follow in Elijah's footsteps. A tornado is a powerful natural phenomenon, and in the Bible, it is often seen as a sign of God's presence. Before Elijah ascended to heaven, a series of miraculous events occurred. He and Elisha crossed the Jordan River, and Elijah used his prophetic mantle to part the river, a symbolic act of God's intervention and power. The tornado appeared when everything was ready, as if it were an affirmation that Elijah's work was complete, and the next step was to begin. God does not need great miracles or loud events to demonstrate his power. On the contrary, it is in these quiet and seemingly simple moments that he chooses to open a new door for his work. The tornado that lifted Elijah into heaven demonstrated that God is all-powerful, can do anything he wants, and nothing can stop his plans. At the moment of Elijah's ascension to heaven, many might have thought it was the end of an era. However, this event was a sign of a new beginning. Elisha, Elijah's faithful disciple, stood by and witnessed his teacher's departure. This was not just a parting, but also a transfer of prophetic mission, where Elisha would take up the work that Elijah had begun and continue what his teacher had done. As Elijah was taken up into heaven, the prophetic mantle that he gave to Elisha became a symbol of succession, an act that symbolized the power, responsibility, and mission that God had given to Elijah, now being taken over by Elisha. This was a clear sign that God's work never ends when one person leaves, but continues through those chosen by God to continue the mission. The tornado was not just a natural phenomenon, but also a sign of the transfer of mission from Elijah to Elisha. Elijah had completed his work on earth, but God's prophetic mission was not yet over. The appearance of the tornado was God's way of affirming that he always had a plan for the nation of Israel, that he would never abandon them and that he would continue to lead them through new leaders. The tornado not only took Elijah away, but also the greatness and mission that God had given to Elisha, who would continue the work that Elijah had begun. In a world full of chaos and challenges, this tornado was a reminder that God's work never stops, no matter how the world around him changes. The tornado was a clear demonstration that God is always preparing for the next generation, and that even though Elijah is gone, God's work will not be interrupted. Elijah's departure was an inspiring event, a miraculous moment that demonstrated God's limitless power and the great continuation of his plan. The ascension of Elijah into heaven in a whirlwind is one of those special moments in the Bible where we see the greatness of God and the great plan he has for the nation of Israel. It was not the end but the beginning of a new divine journey. God was preparing Elisha, his faithful disciple, to take up the prophetic mission that Elijah had begun. The whirlwind took Elijah away, but God's work will never stop. It will continue through faithful men like Elisha, who will continue God's mission in a new era. This event is not just the end of an era but the beginning of a new program in Israel's history. It is a powerful reminder that even though one person leaves, God's work will continue through those he has chosen to continue his mission. It will continue through faithful men like Elisha, who will continue God's mission in a new era. This event is not just the end of an era but the beginning of a new program in the history of Israel. It is a powerful reminder that even when one person leaves, God's work will continue through those he has chosen to continue his mission. It will continue through faithful men like Elisha, who will continue God's mission in a new era. This event is not just the end of an era but the beginning of a new program in the history of Israel. It is a powerful reminder that even when one person leaves, God's work will continue through those he has chosen to continue his mission. What an incredible journey we've just shared. Elijah's story is one of the most profound tales in history, a testament to faith, loyalty, and obedience in the face of the most daunting challenges. His miraculous acts and the presence of God in his life offer us powerful lessons in trust and perseverance. The next time you face a trial in your life, remember that God's guidance is always with you, ready to lead you through even the toughest times. Hold on to your faith because every challenge is an opportunity to witness the limitless power and love of God. If you've been inspired by this incredible journey of Elijah, make sure to comment below and share how this story has touched your heart. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories and profound insights. Keep believing, because God's plan for you is just as extraordinary as the story we've just uncovered. Until next time, keep your faith strong, and remember that the journey of faith is always ongoing, just like Elijah's, who continues to inspire us even today.